Hi, welcome to God Stories today. My name's Chris Thompson. You guys coming? Hello, welcome to God Stories. Today, I am very privileged indeed to have the company of a brother in Christ, Paul Cowley. This is the very first time that he and I have chatted in depth, so it's a journey of discovery for me as well as it is for you. Although I did have the privilege of reading his biography, which I'd just like to hold up to you now, beforehand, and I've got tons and tons of questions about his God story as a result. But I really would love to recommend this book to you. It was one of those books that was a real page turner. Please believe my sincerity when I say this. Paul and viewers, when I was reading this book, I did it upstairs in the top of our house, and every other chapter, I came down and I spoke to my better half. And I said to her, "You'll never guess what happened next. You'll never guess what happened next. You'll never guess what happened next." And she basically just, every time I came down to get a coffee, she just said, What's the update? What's the update? What's next? I said, "You're going to have to read it." But I just had to recount every chapter to her because it was just so thrilling. And I just love the fact that your story really fits in with the vision of our channel, which is about what God can do in the life of a person when they say yes to him. And then God sort of turns that life around and does extraordinary things in that life, but also through that life to reach others. And what you've done with Alpha and so forth, of which I'm a great fan. I'm a big fan of HTB and a big fan of Alpha. What you've done in touching the lives of thousands, literally thousands of people over the world through your yes to God is just astonishing. And it's all chronicled in this book, people. So I really do recommend that you buy it. I really do. And if you come to our conference, which we hope will be on something like the 9th of October, 2021, there'll be many copies there for you to get your hands on. So thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Chris.
I just want to say, in terms of the vision for this channel, I've said that already, but the flavor of the channel, the vision God gave me was for just two people, sat at a breakfast table, super relaxed, coffee in hand, coffee in hand, croissants, all the rest of it, and just basically talking about their God stories. It was super relaxed, but also super deep. So this is just really meant to be two people just chatting about their God story. And as a result of that, it's not overly formal. It's just, we can laugh, we can cry, and actually I would say there was one chapter where, and again, please buy this book as a result, it was so powerful. There was one chapter when, and I'm not given for this, and I feel a little bit silly saying this, I did shed a few tears. I did shed a few tears, and we'll get to that. So, lastly, to all the viewers, in terms of the questions, I've done my homework, as you can see here. I've read the book and I've got loads of questions based on them. But because you may not have read the book yet, I'm going to context every question with a bit of narrative so that you know why I'm asking the question itself. Okay, so if you see me reading a little bit, that's why. So here goes, Paul. Bless you. I'm so thrilled for this. Let's journey through your God story. Paul, you were born on the 5th of November 1955 in Grumsall Hospital with the help of some nuns from the St. Paul's Order. I did smile when I read that, so I thought that was God's poetry. We'll come back to that. You say, "Mine is the story of a man who eventually succumbed to God knocking on his door. This is the story of my fall and my redemption, my journey of discovery and an insight into how I got the help I needed when I missed the mark." Your book starts by painting a picture of your early family context. On page 6, you say, "Unlike my parents, I didn't experience World War II, but a flak jacket and a tin helmet might have given me some protection from my parents' crossfire." As with anyone, their parents are hugely influential in their lives and to whom we become. Tell us about your mother and your father, which I know is a big question. But just if you can, just tell us how they affected you, how they sort of brought you to where you are now in your life. Who are they? Who were they?
Thanks, Chris. You've done your research. Yeah, just to tell you one thing about the nuns thing. My parents were going to call me Lyndon. That was the name that my father wanted. For some reason, he was obsessed with Lyndon Johnson, who was the president of the United States at the time. So he thought a good name would be Lyndon. So in Crumpsall, in Salford, the hospital, it was maybe the maternity wing. I don't know. Was run by nuns, but the order was the Order of St. Paul. And one of the senior nuns said to my father, "That's a ridiculous name. You need to call him Paul in our order." And that's how I got the name.
Let's go.
Which is, when you think of the context now, is pretty weird. It's something going on even then. My mum and dad were really extraordinary characters, larger than life. My father was in his prime, 6'3", an enormous character. One of those, when he walked in a room, he would be the centre of attention for good and bad reasons. Born in Toxteth in Liverpool. My grandfather, so his father, was a bare-knuckle street fighter. So you can see that's how my granddad earned his money in Liverpool. And my father was, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. So a very violent man, not to me, but growing up, just very sort of impulsive, explosive, a man of short sentences, not many words, more actions. And my mum was from Birkenhead in Cheshire. And she was about 5 foot, if that. And she was the same, really, explosive, violent, but more in a verbal way, not in a physical way. So a combination of those two, and like I mentioned in the book, they were both non-believers, so no God in the Cowley family at all that I can research back, and both alcoholics. So a combination of all that, if people know the area, Toxteth, Birkenhead, a dysfunctional life background, alcoholism, and no God, no church, no nothing. It was a pretty heavy area. Hence that line which Amanda wrote the book, my wife. She put that line in when I was trying to describe, when she said, "What was it like?" It was like a war zone. It was a constant, loud, noisy. If anyone is listening on operations or the military, just loud, explosive noise all the time. So that's where she put flat jacket and tin helmet. Might have helped.
That was a really good description, and thank you for that, because it's foundational to your life. And it's really important that the viewers know about this. But there's so much of your life, I feel like I'm almost going to be skipping over quite a lot. So again, I really do come back to everything. You've got to buy this book to really, really understand where Paul's coming from. But thank you for that. On page 22/3, you recount how you had left home. The context you've just very, very vividly painted meant that it was a tumultuous childhood, as it were, and there was lots of love. You really recount that there were some really tender moments amongst you as a family and amongst your parents, as it were, but there were also tumultuous times, as you mentioned. And if you ended up having, if you like, you left home, and you ended up on the streets, and then you were taken into a squat by Photo Booth Boy, please read the book, with whom you then went on to do a series of petty crimes, which ended up with you stealing cars. And then one day you stole a car, which wasn't an unusual event for you, but you were driving down what sounded like a motorway, and you ran out of petrol, and you had to pull over. And I think you were being tailed by a police car at the time, or certainly a police guard turned up. And you had the wherewithal, you had to think about it quickly, but you had the wherewithal when the policeman pulled you up and said, "Is this your car, sir?" And you actually sort of said, "Well, actually, if I say yes, it's going to go better with me rather than me saying no." So you said yes, but nonetheless, you were arrested. This led to a 6-month sentence in Risley Remand Centre. For most people, mate, that would have been enough to have broken them. Really would have been enough to have broken them. How did you feel, and what was it like in Risley?
It was a bit of a shock to get the sentence, because like you've just said, it was, and I'm not proud of that. It was petty theft. It was shops. It was houses, warehouses, and I've always had a fascination for cars. Sadly, in those days, other people's, and I still have. It's something I inherited from my father, who was passionate about cars and got himself in debt with most of them. So when I got in trouble, I was constantly caught because not a very good thief. So that was bound over to keep the peace, magistrates court, fined, put on probation, which I did and then I didn't do. And eventually I got put in front of a magistrate again, the bench in Manchester, magistrates court. And you probably know, I don't know if some do, but the most that a magistrate can give a magistrate's court is a 12-month sentence. Anything after that, you have to go to Crown Court. And they were so fed up with me. I remember them, because your rap sheet is in front of them, and it was fines, it was probation, it was unemployment, not paying the fines, back to court again. And they were really sick of me. But I thought I was going to get another telling off and another session of probation. Which I thought, it's all right, it's a cup of tea and a biscuit and a chat and I'll get away with it. And then the magistrate on the bench, it was a man in the middle and two women either side. He just looked at me and said, Cowley, you are not listening to what we're trying to do. We're trying to help you and you are not interested. I would give you a year, but my colleagues have decided to give you 6 months of short, sharp shock treatment. You, my son, are going to prison. And I remember that thinking, hang on, that wasn't the plan. And instead of going back out to, back out onto the street, I went, if anyone's been in court and through that, I just went down the stairs into the jail in the courthouse and then in a van and then driven off to this detention Borstal remand centre, which was called Risley. And its nickname was, which one of the officers told me, it was called Grizzly Risley, and it was horrible. I remember getting there and in reception, I remember first of all thinking everyone looks so big. I thought I was sort of this lad who can handle everything and would get away with stuff. And now I was in a state of panic, I think. Right. And I got there and it was even the reception. I was a bit sarcastic to one of the officers and. I got a clip around the back of the ear. And I remember thinking, I don't think they're allowed to do that. And then all my stuff got put in a box and my name was written on it and it was put on a shelf. And I remember seeing the box with Cowley written on it. I was in a bib and brace thing, and it was awful. It was a real shock to the system, exactly what the magistrate said to me.
And it seemed to do the trick, though, because you said at the end of it, I am never going back there. When your father picked you up, said, I'm never going back there. And it clearly did have an effect on you. But interestingly, though, you recount in the first half of your book, because your book is separated into two parts. It's like Old Testament and New Testament. Right? And the first half is saturated with you talking about being restless, being anxious, searching for something. And that seemed to be the underbelly of it all. Thus, when you came out of Ridley, on page 33, you recount how whilst driving your van, because you got a bit of a job as a driving van then, you noticed an army poster, as I remember those as a kid as well, saying, do you want a life of adventure? Join the army. My father was in the army. I was born in an army camp. I had the army all around me as I was growing up. I was posted with my father all over the place. He was actually posted in Gibraltar, where you were for 3 years. He was posted about 1968 to 71, something like that. So I think a generation before yours. So as I was reading this, I also felt, I know this life. I know this life. But anyway, you saw this poster, join the army. But at first you weren't allowed to join because you had a criminal record. But through your persistence, because there was something that the sergeant said about you maybe coming back, and you locked onto that. And through your persistence, you kept knocking. And then this officer basically was told about you and he eventually let you into the army. How did you feel when you walked out of that recruitment office? And what was life like generally as a soldier from that moment onwards?
Well, from leaving home at 16 and then getting in trouble at 17, then coming out of Risley. And then, for the years before I joined the army at 21, those years were very restless. So lots of sort of, again, not proud of my life, but I want to be honest with you. One night stands, broken relationships, drinking, just stuff I wouldn't want to do again. Living on my own in a bedsit in a flat, trying to stay out of trouble, terrified about going back to that place again. I didn't want to go there. So I had no friends. I was quite isolated. And you're right, I was driving a transit van, delivering furniture and working in a bar at night. So I'd really isolated myself because I thought, everywhere I go, there's trouble and there's chaos. So if I just stick with myself and nobody else, I'll be all right. And that's what I was doing when I was driving that truck. The 6 months of knocking on that door and having the same thing said to me was really annoying. And on the last day, 6 months later, I went in, same conversation with the sergeant, recruiting sergeant. And as I went in, I said, look, just tell me I can't get in because this is really boring. And you keep winking and telling me you never know, son. And that's when he took me back into the recruiting office, and I sat with the major. And he just said, we have been watching you for the last 6 months. You are pretty determined to get in, aren't you? And I said, I am. I've got nowhere else to go. I'm fed up. I want some adventure. And that's when I got my hand on the Bible. I signed, I swore allegiance to the crown, and I was accepted. And still, when I'm talking to you, Chris, it's, that was 27th of January, 1976 in Manchester. It was such an exciting day because it was a sense of feeling accepted and wanted, and someone seeing something in me. And I guess I would say hope started to rise within me. Not a biblical hope, just a hope that something might be different and change. And it was such an exciting time. And I went through selection and 27 weeks basic training, and I hit my regiment in Germany, 49th Field Regiment. And God, it was one of the best times of my life being in the military.
You seem to thrive in the army.
I loved it. First of all, at school, I went to a pretty heavy school in Manchester, and I was bullied a lot, and I had an awful time, hence being expelled for truancy. And when I walked through the gates at Woolwich Arsenal, the home of the artillery in London, I remember saying to myself, as I walked through the gates, no one lays a hand on me again. That's the end of that. It stops at these gates. And it did. The army fed me, it watered me, it clothed me, it brought out some skills. I found out I was quite fit. I was a good runner. I was good at leadership. I had potential. And it taught me to look after myself, self-defense, a bit of boxing, a bit of unarmed combat, Aikido. So in that, I became, unfortunately, someone who could really look after themselves and wouldn't be bullied ever again. But the army gave me this family, and I felt part of something. For the first time, I felt like I was sort of valued and nurtured in something. And it was just brilliant.
I've never been in the army, but I did contemplate it. But having grown up in the circles that I did with the army all around, and my father being in the army and so forth, I get what you're saying vicariously. I really do. And I was padre to it was 450 Squadron for a while, and it was just the best because I understood the culture, and it was just fabulous. It really was. So thank you for saying that. But anyway, you're in the army now, and as I said, you seem to be in your element. And it was there that you met your first wife, Katie. You had a child, Clinton. Throughout this time, you were stationed in places, as we said, like Ireland and Germany at the beginning. But for various reasons, I'm going swiftly here, bless you, I say this with love, your marriage broke up. Why do you think that happened?
Well, when I'd finished basic training, and I'd got some junior promotion in there, so I was doing really well. I was going to this regiment, 49th Field Regiment, in a place called Hona. This is the Cold War era, so we're on the border of Russia over there in a place called Hona and Soltar. And it was really exciting. I was really excited about whatever was going to happen. Was brilliant. And I had a girlfriend at the time, as I said, Katie in the book. And I said to my sergeant in training, I'm so excited about where I'm going. He said, oh, you'll love it, son. It's brilliant. It's a fighting unit. I said, just one thing, Sarge. Can I take my girlfriend? And he kind of looked at me and said, we don't do girlfriends in the army. We do wives, but you can't take your girlfriend. So I said, oh, I'm leaving 2 weeks leave. You'll know all this. And I said to Katie, I've got some brilliant news. I've been accepted into a fighting regiment in Germany, wherever that was. She said, oh, brilliant. And what other? I said, yeah, you can't come. She went, oh. I said, but you can come if we get married. So long story short, without boring you, I found a church very near where we were in Stockport, just outside Manchester. And I, no idea of this God stuff. I walked into the church, met this lovely vicar, he's a bit elderly. And God, I was so rude to him. I said, look, I'm in the military. I'm posted to a fighting unit in Germany. Me and my girlfriend need to get married. You're the person that does that. Can you do your stuff? and I need it done next week if possible. Thanks very much. And now as a vicar, he was in complete shock. And I just said, so what, Saturday next week will be good with it or whatever? Is that, what are you doing during the week? Anyway, after some negotiation, we got married 2 weeks later. And I went out to Germany and I brought this young woman with me who had no idea. And we were in emergency accommodation, which is basically a caravan till the home was ready. And after about a year, I realized that I couldn't really handle the responsibility of being and having to look after somebody else. Mm-hmm. So it was starting to go a bit pear-shaped, and I was starting to sort of roam. And a friend of mine in the army, in the battery bar, or the regimental bar one night said, you know what you should do? You should have a kid. I said, oh, really? He said, yeah, if you have a child, it'll bring your marriage together and you'll be better. I thought, all right, brilliant. A year later, my son was born, Clinton. And for 3 years, 2.5 years, it was brilliant. By the time Clinton was 3, I was way out my depth. I couldn't handle this responsibility of being a father. I didn't know what that was. I had no model of that. I didn't know how to be a husband. I had no model of that. And it was a complete nightmare. Not Katie's fault at all. Completely mine. So I thought the only thing I can do is get rid of this baggage. Mm-hmm. So I got divorced and I sent my wife and child packing back to UK, and I continued with my career. Again, just me. Everything was all right then.
Did God feature at all at this time?
No God. No God whatsoever. Like I said, an atheist family, atheist mother and father. At school, I had no religious education that I can remember. Edgerton Park County Secondary School. Don't remember anything about that. And then in prison, that 6 months, I never met a chaplain. No one knocked on my door and said, do you want to do an alpha course or whatever? There was nothing then. And then 17 years nearly in the military, 5 regiments, 2 tours of Northern Ireland, the Falklands campaign. I never met a padre. So no one talked to me about God whatsoever. And now I realize that's what was lacking, moral compass. So after that divorce, I was on my own for a while, which was great. Different courses, different regiments, more promotion. And then I didn't like being on my own. And then I got married again. And that lasted, that to Julie, that lasted probably 2 years, and then another divorce. Same thing. Definitely not Katie and Julie's fault. Completely my fault.
I like the way you met Julie, though. You recount it in the book as like you were in a pub, you were with your squaddy mates, and Julie walked in with her then sort of quasi boyfriend, and you took one look at her, and you kind of like didn't even clock him. Obviously, you must have seen him somehow, but you just went straight up to her with him standing right next to her and said something like, "Do you want a drink?" And then it's like so brazen, and it's like, and the boyfriend's there, and
you get some taste of my character, which I'm not proud of, but there was definitely a strength in it. And it was in a British Legion working man's club, basically, where not far from the barracks. And I went in there with a mate of mine. We were having a few beers and playing darts. And then we had a rest and someone else came on. And it was Julie and her boyfriend who were playing with 2 others, playing darts. And she was a pretty good darts player. And I thought, goodness me, she's attractive. She looks great. And she can play darts.
Woohoo!
When she went to the bar with her boyfriend, I just went over to her and chatted her up, and that was the start of a relationship.
Right,
I didn't even bother about him, to be honest.
I both admire you, like the caveman inside me admires you, but the priest in me is like, seriously, Paul.
not a good. He was a really nice guy as well. Later on, I bought his car off him as well, which was nice.
Okay.
So I took his car and his girlfriend.
Oh man. Anyway, okay.
He was a nice guy. He was a nice guy.
I'm sure. So anyway, that relationship, that marriage with Julie ended. And hilariously, you accept an invitation, because by this time you've had enough of relationships, enough of girls, enough of drinking as well. You accept an invitation to go to Cyprus to do some adventure training with people. And you think it's going to be a time, almost like monastic, if I may use that sort of like, to basically just get your head together. But rather wonderfully, in the middle of nowhere, you bump into what is going to turn out to be, in some sense, the woman who puts you back together, Amanda. and
Yes.
that relationship starts. Looking back on that now, here's a strange question for us, a God question. Looking back on that now, even though you technically, as you just testified, weren't in a relationship with God, didn't think about God, didn't sort of even contemplate his existence, but looking back on that now, do you think that somehow maybe God might have been in that and brought you guys together?
Yeah, oh no, absolutely, Chris, absolutely. In Scripture, in Jeremiah, mentioned in the Old Testament, it says that God has a good and perfect plan, a plan to prosper and not to harm, to give you hope in the future. But if you don't know that plan, if no one explains that stuff to you, really, you just go through life, which I did to nearly the age of 40, just thinking that they're all coincidences and luck. You just happen to be here. So I was talking to someone last night who asked me the similar question. And when I look back, it's very humbling to see that God was there all the time. But I didn't know him and I didn't recognize him and I wasn't friends with him. There wasn't a relationship. So how on earth am I supposed to know it's him? But God definitely gave me Amanda, in those unusual circumstances which you're describing. And I love the way you say a monastic experience. I had no idea what monastic meant at the time. But what I did go to my colonel in charge of the regiment and say to him, I think I'm getting in trouble, sir. I think I'm drinking, and I was a good soldier. I say that humbly, but I was, but I'm drinking too much. Relationships, 2 divorces. It's just I'm not doing well. Could you help me? And he said, I know where you can go. And that's how I ended up going to Troodos, which is the only mountain in Cyprus. And at the time when I went, there was absolutely nothing there. It was just a signals post for the military in the Mediterranean. And also it was an adventure training center because there was nothing there, no tourism, no bars. And I thought, and he said to me, that's a place where you can get your head together, because he knew I had potential in the military, but I was losing it. And that's why I went there, to have this monastic experience. and about a week just to train soldiers to rock climb, map reading, a bit of mountaineering, some canoeing, and that sort of stuff. That's what I did every single day, which was brilliant. In creation, just doing nothing. And then, one day when we were teaching abseiling and climbing, a colleague of mine, a corporal, said to me, boss, I think I can hear some women's voices. And I said, we were in a desolate sort of place. I said, not here, mate. There's no, he said, no, I can hear women. And he said, I think they're down there in the little ravine. So anyway, we abseiled down, got the lads busy. We abseiled down, and there was 2 women there.
That must have looked so cool, by the way. You just, like proper Bear Grylls, abseiling down. There you are, young man as well. It must have looked so cool.
But you know what? I thought it was cool, but if you've read the book, I abseiled down there, and there was these 2 young women there, Amanda and Christina, sat on rocks sketching. They were art students, and the whole thing turned out. I invited them back. They'd been up there. They got stuck. The bus had gone. They couldn't get back, and basically, I just wanted to look after them. There was at the beginning, there was no romantic inclination towards it, because I just wanted to stay away from women. But they were struggling. They were on their own, and they were stuck. So, in the rank I had and the authority, I just brought them back to where we were staying, and basically really trying to look after them. But, when you run away from things, they have a tendency to hit you right in the face. And that's what happened on that rock.
And the way in which it's written, it feels genuinely like there was a splitting of the atom moment. It felt like, there was a divine help, which is why I asked the question in you guys getting together. She was a free spirit. That's how I sort of read it. There's a wonderful picture of her with a helmet on, abseiling down a rock in the book. Yes. And some of the tales that you sort of paint of you guys getting up to in Cyprus, it just seemed like the most incredible time of 2 souls becoming one. Now, you returned home, and your relationship with Amanda continued and blossomed. Now, rather interesting, you tried out for the SAS, and you were doing really well. On the selection, you were doing really, really well. But there was a moment towards the end where you just had this like mental click where you just kind of said, you know what, my language now, this just isn't for me. and you turn around to select the selectors, the DSs, I think they're called, the selectors, and you basically said, look, I'm done. And they were actually really quite annoyed of you because you were pretty much at the front when you were doing all of the exercises and so forth. Was that the restlessness again, do you think?
It was, I was always, 5 regiments. That's why someone asked me last night on an interview, tell us about your friends in the military over 17 years. There must be a lot. There isn't. Because normally in the military, maybe like your father, you stay in one regiment and you stay in one unit. I went through 5 units, Northern Ireland, the Falklands, 5 units. In the end, I was in the Army Physical Training Corps. And I tried for everything. And I was pretty fit. And like I said, I was a good soldier. And someone said you should try selection for the Special Air Service. And I got recommended by my colonel, you have to go on it. And I was doing really well, 5 or 6 weeks into it. But I kind of realized, not in a spiritual way or in a great deal of wisdom, with being around in the camp for a while, I looked at these types of characters that were in the SAS. And I write about it in the book. They are extraordinary people. Not just fit. I was fitter than most people on that selection. I can say that honestly. There's reports somewhere about it. And when I did that, the bit what you're talking about, I had a large rucksack. I'd been out for a while walking. I was doing well, and I fell over, and I just landed in about 3 inches of water, and I just lay there for a while, and I thought, well, I won't repeat what I thought, but I remember thinking, what am I doing? Yeah. What the heck am I doing this for? So as I fell down, I came up differently, and I walked to the checkpoint. DS is called directional staff, and the guy unzipped his, because it was freezing and snowing. He unzipped his tent and said, you have to point where you are on the map, point where you're going to on the map. He said, you're about 5 minutes late, but crack on, I won't do anything. And I said, staff, I've had enough. And he was really, they're not the kindest of people. And he said to me, I didn't hear that, away you go. I said, no, I've had enough. He said, one more chance, Cowley. I didn't hear that, away you go. You're doing all right, crack on, come on. I said, no, I've had enough. Yeah. And then his attitude changed. And then I got back to camp, and then I was debriefed, and to be honest, I got a fair telling off, because in a good way I was doing all right, and I kind of rejected them, which didn't go down well. But I just knew it wasn't for me. It was escapism again. Okay. It was always trying to find an exit to do something which I could do, and I don't know if I'd have got through, but I certainly haven't got the mental capacity that the men and the people in the special forces have, because they are unique.
In my childhood, we lived next to a gentleman who was in the special forces. We lived in this particular army camp, and we lived next to a guy who was in special forces. And I remember one particular morning, his car wouldn't start. I must have been about 5 years old, I guess. And his car wouldn't start. And I think the base was about 16 miles away or something like that. And his car wouldn't start. And my mother was next to him at the time and said, I'll go and get my husband to give you a lift. And he went, that's all right, I'll run. She's like, I'll run there. So it was just like, what? Who are these people? They are super
extraordinary. And that my highest esteem goes to them, and they're just extraordinary. But it's not about fitness.
No,
you can be fit. It's the mental capacity and whatever it is to do the things they do, like that. The car's not working. I'll grab the suitcases and I'll run in. Now, that's not about being fit. That's about determination, and stamina, and something else in here that makes you quite unique.
So impressive. I'm going to say quite a lot here now, just to context it, okay? Because also, bless you, time and other such things. Excuse me. On page 89, this is the next phase of your story. You take Amanda to meet your mother, who I believe is called Brenda, if I've got that right, for the first time. You were nervous about this, but unbeknown to you, your mother had undergone an immense change. You then, around this time, buy a house in Nuneaton with Amanda. Whilst there, you accept an invitation to spend 3 months in Switzerland, I think again to do some adventure training with about 20 squaddies or something like that. Amanda is allowed to come with you if she's allowed to cook. Rather interestingly, your mother makes contact with you to inform you that she is selling her house to move closer to you guys in Nuneaton. Surprised and nervous about this, you nonetheless invite her to stay in your new-ish home in Nuneaton to look for a house whilst you guys go to Switzerland for 3 months. You notice a change in her, but you seemingly don't trust it at first. Whilst in Switzerland, you receive a phone call saying your mother had been taken to hospital. Rushing back to England, you learn from Amanda that your mother has cancer. Within 10 days, your mother died in your arms whilst in hospital. I must confess that's where, I'm getting a bit choked now, the tears started to roll down my eyes. A few days after your mother's funeral, Amanda was helping you out with sorting out your mother's possessions. One day you joined her and putting most of her things in black bags to give to charity shops. You then went to a back room window where there was a small table and spotted a Good News Bible on the table. Opening the front cover, you saw a phone number. Phoning it, you asked how they knew your mother. The person on the end of the line said your mother had become a Christian 2 years ago and the Bible was given to her at her baptism. Now, there's so much I could ask about that, but I think I'm going to bumble this question, okay? Because there's just so much there, and it was seismic, and I genuinely was in a bit of a state when I was reading this. The thought of you lying on that hospital bed, cradling your mother, and actually you paint the picture as if in holding her hand and cradling her, you gave her permission to go, which is incredible. But considering your relationship with your mother had its seasons, all based on love, but had its seasons of ups and downs, do you think nonetheless your mother, in that short space of time where she exampled in the way she was in her demeanor, her ontology, rather, she didn't actually tell you she'd become a Christian, but she exampled something which said to you there had been a change, which you found out about in the way we just recounted. I'm going to bumble this a bit, but do you think she nonetheless gave you the greatest gift of all at the end, which was an example of someone's life being turned around, having met Jesus, and eternal life was part of their life from that moment onwards?
Goodness, you certainly read the book, Chris. It was, you know, I had a love-hate relationship with my mother. Your mother's your mother, whatever they do, and your father's your father. You know, we know that. And it was all traumatic, as you said, and I didn't know what I was doing half the time. You know, I had no moral compass to do anything really. It was all making it up on the day. And I drove back, you know, within 24 hours from Austria with Amanda to get to my mother. And you're right, Amanda didn't really tell me till I was nearly there that she was dying, because I was angry. And when I got into the ward where my mother was before she went into a coma, the first thing she said to me is, "You took your bloody time getting here, didn't you?" You know, so I thought, there you go, that's my mother. And I walked out and Amanda said to me, "You need to go back in. She's not well, Paul." So I went back in and we sat and we chatted, but she never mentioned anything about faith. And then, you know, I used to say to Amanda, what on earth has she come? Why has she looked me up? Why is she, after all these years, you know, what the hell? What does she want? I don't trust her. Do you know? And that's why I said stay in the house while we go away, because I thought she'd get bored and go back. You know, novelty would wear off. But she got ill. She's in hospital, and it was awkward when she was dying. I didn't know what to do at all, and I said to Amanda, "Do you think I can lay with her?" She said, "Paul, do whatever you want to do." So I did get in bed with her. And you're quite right. I held her. She was small. Her head was on my chest. And, you know, I didn't know what I was doing. I was just saying, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for being an idiot. I'm sorry for the things I've said and what's happened in our lives together. And she was dying, basically. And she died on my chest. And it was Amanda, again, who's been my saving grace, who said, "I think you should let her go. I think you should give her permission to go." And I didn't know what that meant. And I just said, "Mum, I love you. And I'm sorry. I just wish I could have been a better son. And I wish we'd had more time." And the little heart monitor on the side just stopped and just went straight. And she died. And that was another, you know, that was another traumatic thing, even though I said I've had no trauma in my life through therapy. I was really angry because I just got her back and now she'd gone. I mean, what do you do with that when you've got nowhere to take it? You know what I mean? I did think, goodness, my mother, maybe we could have Sunday lunches. Maybe she could help me with my washing. Maybe we could have this normal relationship that mums, and now you're dead and I'm on my own again. Well, anyway, it was that was, and then when I found that Bible, which was confusing, and when I opened it, pictures of me fell out as a kid, which was very disturbing. And then there was all bits of writing in it and stuff and everything. And I remember thinking, when I spoke to that woman, I said to the woman, how do you know my mother? She said what you said. I said she's dead, and I hung up. But then I couldn't get this concept of Christians, which I hated and I didn't know. And my mother, who was a hard northern woman, Christian and Jesus and God and baptisms, what has gone on there with her? So it was a real, I drank quite a lot at that time. I was angry at that time. Amanda was amazing with me at that time. I was just I was traumatized actually now looking back, and I didn't know what was going on.
Wow. People have got to read your book. They really do. I think your mother was amazing. I genuinely do. And one day you're going to be standing in her presence again. You're going to be able to ask her all these questions. But I suspect she wanted to example to you what she had found.
Well, do you know what, Chris? In retrospect and hindsight, now I've had years to think about it. I couldn't work out why she wanted to see me. I couldn't work out why she wanted to come and be with me. I couldn't work out why she was so sort of different with Amanda and not volatile and swearing and I couldn't work it all out. But now she had an epiphany somewhere in that church, and she wanted her son. And the only thing she wanted to do, she was divorced, different marriages on her own, getting older. She wanted me. And no one explained that to me. And she, for whatever reason, didn't explain that to me. And only afterwards did all that stuff come relevant, which is really humbling. That's why she left her home and everything to be with me, because she wanted reconciliation. She wanted all the Bible stuff that I didn't know about. And that's
amazing.
God is very gracious in that stuff.
Special place for your mother in heaven, my friend. And one day you're going to be able to embrace her again. Yeah. Again, I'm going to say quite a lot here because I want the viewers to have a context, okay? But a friend suggested you try out for the physical training corps, managing to get on the selection course, which seemingly was akin to the SAS selection. It was so bleeding hard. You came across a nutcase instructor called Eric Martin, who comes back into your story quite powerfully later on. You managed to pass and was posted to, I think it was 3rd Battalion Green Jackets based in Colchester. However, they were about to be posted to Gibraltar about 4 months later. Thus, off you went to Gibraltar, although Amanda got a brilliant job in Mentor, I think it is, films.
Mentor.
Thank
Mentor
you.
films, yeah.
In Wardour Street, London. Thus, you began to fear you might lose her, bless you. Into the mix, as you began your time in Gibraltar, you became friends with another instructor called Scooby. Tragically, on a try-me clip in Africa, bless you, he died. As you tried to rescue the rest of the soldiers who Scooby had been with in the climbing party, you climbed up a sheer, at least that's how I pictured it, cliff face that they were like literally stranded at the top of. You hadn't really thought about what to do because you were in an understandable blind panic about rescuing these soldiers, having just seen your fellow instructor die in front of your eyes, bless you. And you get up the top and you find yourself in equal difficulty. You're literally hanging on the side of this cliff right at the top, and you're thinking, I can't swing this rope around this sort of like this escarpment sort of thing, as it were. I can't even get to these soldiers. I'm in trouble now. What do I do? And then remarkably out of nowhere, you feel this tap on your shoulder, and you look, and you describe, if I remember right, there was a young, lean, fit guy there who basically fastened you to the cliff, as it were, and rescued everyone else, and seemingly just disappeared. Yeah. Now, interestingly, you quote pieces of scripture afterwards about angels and so forth. Do you think it was an angel?
At the time, no idea. Now, absolutely. The piece of scripture you're talking about, which, well, anyway, that incident was extraordinary. He just disappeared. You know, the lads were off, we were off, we got Scooby off, we got evacuated back to Kahal Barracks in Kenya. We were meant to go on to Kilimanjaro, and the lads didn't want to for obvious reasons, and we went home. And it was, you know, you would think an incident like that would make you drop to your knees and start singing hallelujah and all that stuff, because I would have died, because you're absolutely right. I got up there on sheer adrenaline, about 800 feet up. I realized I didn't have any equipment, no pitons to get around the nose that you described. And it started to rain and it was getting dark. And I remember throwing my face onto the cliff face saying, I'm going to die. And I started to weep unashamedly, crying. I could hear the lads round the corner of the rock face shouting for me. My friend had just died and I saw his body at the bottom of the rock face. And I didn't know what to do. I was at the end of my tether, if you want to call it. And I leaned into that rock face and I said, God, I don't want to die. And I was crying. And I literally felt a tap on my shoulder. Again, you know, I turned around and this character, like I described in the book, was there. And he didn't speak. He just pushed me further into the rock face, put a rope around me. He had the things that I was desperate for, which are called pitons, like large big nails that you put into the rock face. He hammered me in, secured me, whipped around the rock face, you know, abseiled the guys off down to the bottom, came back, lowered me down, threw the rope down, just let the rope go. So we caught the rope. And that was it. So the lad said to me, Sarge, that was brilliant. You got that guy. I said, I didn't get him. What did he say to you? They said he didn't speak. And they said to me, where is he? I said, I've no idea. And that was it. I went down to the to our base camp at about 17,000 feet. I got on the radio. I spoke to the young officer that was with us. I said, is there anyone else on the rock? Is anyone here on Mount Kenya? Nobody. We were the only unit because you have to have a license to climb. Absolutely no one. Nothing on there. No tourism. No military. Just us.
What did he look like?
I think I described him in the book. I can't remember. He had long hair. He had like a singlet on, very tanned, you know, like a very good climber, very sinewy, just had this extraordinary, nice brown tanned face with a nice smile, but didn't speak to me. And then gone, you know, and I have tried to research that moment, you know, because we had to go back the next day, get him off, carry Scooby down in a body bag and all that stuff, you know, all the police, everything, the park rangers, every man and his dog was there. It was a massive incident. It's even noted, you know, because I've been back. It's all noted in history that he died there and it was a military operation. But you think that would do something to me, but it was just curious to me. And it was another 4 years before I had that encounter you're talking about with Eric. You know, so we just went home. I got on with my life. And it was just another incident in the box of things I just couldn't understand what was happening.
Thank you for that. You've actually brought us on to the next bit, the postcard. You're back home, and it's 4 years, and you receive a postcard. Tell us about that.
Well, you know, you're doing this really well, Chris, because it was a string of incidents that anyone who's listening to this, who's not a Christian or anything, like I wasn't, it's very confusing what the heck is going on. You know, mother, this, that, what is happening in my life? You know, Hereford, all the things, the units, all this stuff starting to come into my head. And then, anyway, I left the army. I got bored. I got posted as a staff sergeant. I didn't want to go where they sent me, and I left. I moved in with my girlfriend, Amanda, and I did some personal training and fitness. And one day, while I was collecting the bills that came through the post in the morning, this postcard arrived. And it was a bit of an odd postcard that caught my attention because it had a biblical scene on it. It was a shepherd with sheep. And someone had got a pen and done 2 circles around the sheep and written on the postcard, you and me. I thought, what is that? So I turned it over and it said on it, I've become a Christian. You need to marry that woman you're living with. Jesus loves you. Come and see me. And I thought, what is that? And then I looked at the signature, and the signature made me feel sick because this signature was this senior instructor that I had for a year when I transferred into the PT Corps.
Crazy.
And, crazy psychopathic Sergeant Major who was a lunatic, and he was my senior instructor. And it was a tough course. I can't say it was like Hereford because there might be military listening, but it was a pretty tough course. 120 of us started and 18 of us got selected. I was a very proud day to do that. But he was a complete lunatic, and his one aim in life was to fail you, that you weren't capable to get in the regiment that he was in. You were never going to be good enough. So he went out anyway, a horrible man. So it was his signature, and I thought, oh my goodness me, it's that psychopath, that Sergeant Major. And now he's become one of these Jesus lovers, whatever that was. And the worst thing is he knows where I live. So I was in a bit of a panic. So I threw the card to the side. And a day later, Amanda said, are you going to go and see him? I said, no, not at all. And then I thought, do you know what? I will go and see him because he's got no control over me anymore. I'm not in uniform. And I'll go and tell him what an idiot he was for the year and how he made my life hell for that year. So I went to see him, and I spent 3 days with him in Aldershot, which is the Army Physical Training School where I trained. And he was a Sergeant Major now. He was a staffy at the time. And he was just weird because he was different. He was still this, he was Army boxing champion, swimming champion, squash champion, everything champion, and very punchy. And I'd seen him knock people out for disagreeing with him. So I kept my distance from him a little bit. But as he talked, he started talking about God. God has a plan for you, and all the suffering that you've been through. God has a purpose for you, and you can be a good husband. You can be faithful. You can be a good dad. Your son can go. Yeah. And for 3 days, he banged on about that. And actually, I didn't tell him, but during that time, I was starting to think, maybe I could change. Maybe I could be different. But I'm so like my father. I'm so like my grandfather. What's the point? And on the third day, the night that I was leaving in the morning, he walked me to the sergeant's mess, my bunk, and said goodnight to me. And as I said goodnight, I said, I'll see you at breakfast, Eric. He gave me a piece of paper and said, read that before you go to bed. I said, thanks. Got ready for bed. I opened this piece of paper up, and it was all highlighted in yellow with pen arrows coming into this bit that he wanted me to look at. And it was a piece of scripture. I didn't know that at the time. But it's Matthew 22, verse 13, and it says this, and I read this on this piece of paper. The king said to his servants, take this man and bind him hand and foot and throw him into the darkness where there'll be a great deal of wailing and gnashing of teeth.
Nice.
And I thought, oh my goodness, what is that? Bound hand and foot, thrown into an alley in the darkness. I'm a bit claustrophobic as it is. Then there's wailing and shouting, and then there's this gnashing of teeth, whatever that is. So all my years of depravity and everything I've seen and done, which I shouldn't have done and seen, all came into my head at one moment. And I had a complete panic and broke into a sweat and felt sick. And I didn't know what to do. I tried to sleep, I couldn't sleep. Halfway through the night, I got up, and then I had this image of a book that I must have read somehow, old book called Ladybird Books. And it was a Ladybird book of the Lord's Prayer with a picture of 2 sweet young children praying like this. And that image came into my head. And I dropped on my knees. I didn't know what to do. I put my hands together like the image on the book. And I just said, God, I don't want the gnashing of teeth. And tried to sleep. Couldn't sleep. I was up most of the night. I got up for breakfast. I went to see him. He's dressed in all his sort of uniform, sat eating his bacon and eggs. And I walked up to him and I gave him a real mouthful, which I won't repeat now. And, about this thing that the hands tied together, the wailing, the gnashing of teeth. And what is that? And he said, how did you sleep? Again, I'll abbreviate it. I said, I didn't sleep very well. He said, what did you do? I said, well, I was just terrified. And I put my hands together and I said, God, I don't want the gnashing of teeth. Then he looked at me and smiled and went, welcome to the kingdom of God, Paul. You're now a Christian and you're my brother. That was my introduction to the Christian faith.
Is Eric still around?
Oh, yeah, very much so.
I'd like to interview him.
Oh, he is. He works for me now, which is fantastic. He's now the director of Alpha for Military, and is based in Cyprus.
Like to interview him.
So he's still part of HTB and runs the military work that we do. An extraordinary man. Saved my life.
That encounter, and it's almost like God knew that you needed someone like that in order for there to be like a shift in your heart. It led to you sort of like exploring faith a little bit. You tried out a Pentecostal church, which was really packed. No, actually, you tried out, I think, like a middle of the road church that was pretty much empty. And you describe it as, and I'm paraphrasing now, like walking into the OK Corral and you got one of those saloon doors and you open it up and everyone turns around and looks at you. And it's like, and it was half, there was about 20 people in there, I think. And it was just like, this is not for me. You then tried this church it was like a Pentecostal church, which was vibrant and it was wonderful, but they kind of judged you for not being married to Amanda. Yeah. Then you turned up at HTB. And it became your spiritual home. What happened when you turned up at HTB?
Well, the reason I went there is, Eric realized Eric was still a some major evangelist. Let's put it that way. If that describes him, a hardcore evangelist. Hence the scripture he gave me. I think I might be his only convert. And all the time he was.
Well, look what you've done.
Doing evangelism.
We better just say that HTB is Holy Trinity Brompton. It's a really, really impressive church in the centre of London. I thought we better context it in case we're talking a bit too churchy. So what happened?
And it's the home of the Alpha course, which is it's a global course now. And he said to me, you should probably go and do an Alpha course and get some instruction. And when I got on the Alpha course, I went on it with Amanda. We found the church. We were living in London and Amanda working for a TV company. So we found this church and I thought, 17 years in the military, I've done a course and everything. I'll do this course on God. Eric seems to say it was all right. I'll do it. And then I might find out what my mother was into. I might find out what happened on that rock face. I might find out stuff. And we sat through it. And the first thing I realized is that there's some really nice scriptures in the Bible. Some loving scriptures that are nice to read, not the ones Eric gave me all the time. And as it went through the course, if people don't know about it, is an introduction to the Christian faith. It's 15 sessions. It's once a week. It's a bit of food. Before lockdown, it was a bit of food. It was a short video, and then it was a discussion group. And I wasn't very comfortable in it, to be honest, because I didn't know anything. I didn't like being out of my depth. I'm a very practical, self-centered person. And the group was brilliant with me. The leaders of it were really nice, and they annoyed me how nice they were, but it was compelling. And on the weekend, where they talk about the Holy Spirit, part of the Trinity, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, I didn't know what that was, anything to do with that stuff. But mostly it was about prayer and given time to think and space. And it was at that moment on that weekend that somebody very sweetly said, "Can I pray for you?" I said, "No, I'm fine." And then they said, "No, let me pray for you." And that person just prayed that God would give me peace. And I thought, all I've ever wanted all my life is peace, to get off this treadmill that keeps driving me for whatever reason it drives me. And he prayed, and I cried, and he left me alone, which was very sweet. And it's there that I had this sense that God said to me, "Why don't you just come home? Why don't you just throw the towel in?" I did a bit of boxing in my time, and your corner people throw the towel in if the opponent is too strong for you. And I had that imagery, and I basically just threw the towel in and said, "God, if you're there, I'm just really tired. I'm fed up with my life, and I just want some peace, please. That's all I want." And I said that all to the ceiling, basically. That's what I thought. And I had this peace come over me, which was changed my life. It was one of those things, that moment, that weekend. And the Alpha course doesn't change your life, it's God. But for me, it was my character, it was a catalyst to learn some stuff about God. And really from that moment, my life changed. It took a different direction.
I was going to say, because it was a catalyst for your faith, but also the catalyst for your faith to then, or God through your faith to then change so much about your life. Amanda's faith seemingly developed. I think I read that Clinton, your son, his faith started to develop as well. But then rather interestingly, a lady came into your life. Is it Emma Wilson?
Emmy Wilson.
Reverend, is she a priest?
He is now, yeah.
Wilson, she invited you on a mission trip to Dartmoor Prison. Tell us what happened.
Well, she was, she's my sister. She's, I love her to bits. Her and Eric have been fundamental in shaping my faith. Lots of other people, but those two. If they're listening to this, I love them more than a brother and a sister. They are extraordinary. Saved my life in different ways. So Emmy, bless her, I was, I've become a Christian. Very nice. I was running a health club in central London, Champneys, really nice health club. I was a general manager. It was brilliant. I did a testimony in church. Nicky Gumbel, my boss now, the evangelist at the time at HTV, interviewed me. And I mentioned prison briefly because I was ashamed of it. Told the story, got on with my life, health club, secular world. And my PA came in one morning and said to me, Paul, there's a woman from church on the phone who wants to speak to you. And I said, no, thanks. Tell her I'm busy. Okay. And this happened about 2 or 3 days. And then the third day, my PA came in and said, the woman from the church is on. I said, I've told you, just tell her I'm busy. She said, I would, but she's outside.
I've got to interview this lady.
And I said, oh, for goodness sake, have you let her in the club? She said, I can't stop her. So I thought, you know what? I said, okay, we had a restaurant in the club. It was a pretty fancy club. I said, get me a table at the restaurant. I'll give her some breakfast. We'll have a cup of coffee and I'll get rid of her. 5 minutes, done. 3 hours later, this woman was still talking to me. And I'd agreed somehow to go on a visit to Dartmoor Prison to help her with some of the men in the chapel. And when she'd gone, I thought, how on earth did I get into that? I never wanted to go back to prison in my life. So I ended up driving through the night. I had to secure the club at night, drive through the night to Dartmoor Prison, which is, miles away, down on the south coast, and do this prison trip with her, with these other lunatic Christians, where halfway through the chapel service, which had about 40 or 50 men in it, out of the blue, she said, Paul's now going to get up and pray for you. I thought,
I like her.
What's this woman on? God had spoken to her about me and gave her a prophetic vision about me, which she didn't tell me about it then. So I got up and I prayed. And I thought, I don't know what to do. I bluffed the whole thing. And then this guy from the back of the chapel got up. We were in the vulnerable prisoners unit. With that, it's basically all the people, you don't want to know their crimes, really. And this guy got up from the back and walked towards me. And I've been told he was one of the worst characters in the prison. And he stood in front of me and he said, I've just listened to all this stuff that you guys have been talking about. And so does God love me if I give my life to him? I said, yeah, if you're genuine with it. He said, well, I want to do that now. And I said to him, well, why don't you find someone else to pray with and it'll be brilliant. And I looked to my left and my right and everyone was praying for people with their heads down like this. And he said, well, you pray for me. And to be honest, Chris, I did not want to pray for him. So I bumbled through some prayer and he gave his life to Christ. And then he opened his eyes and he looked at me and he fell into my chest and sobbed and sobbed and sobbed. And eventually pulled himself away. And he said to me, so I'm a Christian now. I said, yes, you are. And he said to me, and you're my brother now, aren't you? I said, yes, I am. And all these people in here who are Christians, they're my family now. I said, yes, they are. And he turned around and he walked away. And I had another moment. There was something in that man's eyes that from such a dysfunctional background and done some horrendous things, I saw the image of God. And it was at that moment that I got in the car park and I drove home back to London to my normal job, that I felt God say to me, this is what I want you to do. Yeah. I want you to talk to people like that and work with me and tell them that I love them. Then if they're genuine and if they want to change, that I have a place for them. And it was that drive back that changed my life. It's that got me involved in prison ministry. And that lady, Emmy Wilson.
And your ministry has spanned the world now. And it's touched the lives of thousands of people through the Alpha Course for Prisons and so forth. I mean, it's astonishing. I haven't got much more of your time, but there's so many questions I want to ask you, Paul. I could be here all day, but tell us about, if I can ask you, because we normally finish actually with a bit of a sort of like a bit of fun questions where I just ask you some quick fire sort of fun questions, and then the interviewee sort of finishes with a prayer, if that's okay. But I'd love you to talk to us about ordination, and then if I could ask you maybe 2 more questions after that, that would just be wonderful. So tell us, because around not long after that, it seemed like, I think it was a home group or something. They went round in the home group and they said, what would you like to be if you weren't what you are now? And they went, oh, you know, pilot and this, that, and the other. And you said, rather nervously, I'd like to be a vicar. And everyone went, oh yeah. Tell us about your call to ordination.
It was a home group we were running, and it was fantastic. It was a bit like a Star Wars film, you know, the bar scene in Star Wars when there's all the different characters from all the planets come together. It was a real bunch of people, and it was fantastic. Ex-offenders, men, women, it was, you know, from all sorts of life. And we had lots of marriages, which was very exciting. So we had lots of sort of lots of overnight stays and bars and drinking and stuff like that, you know, the after when the couple's gone off. And it was one night when we were playing this game, and one of our group was called Merrill. And Merrill said, let's play this game which you've just described. And we were in the bar at night. There was about 10 of us, and we all went round. And she said, let's say what you'd want to do if you weren't doing what you're doing now. Health club manager I was. So we went round, and as it was getting to me, I had this panic that I thought, I can't say what I think I want to be. And like they said, someone said a teacher, someone said a pilot, someone said an engineer. And it got to me, and they all looked at me. And I was silent. And I felt sick. And I said, I probably want to be, I know it's stupid, but I think, you know, I'm not, anyway. Merrill said, for goodness sake, Paul, say what it is. And I shut my eyes and I went, I want to be a vicar, I think. And I opened them, thought they'd be in hysterics on the floor. And they all went, yeah, I can see you as a vicar. You know, and that was the first time I'd ever, you know, because God wants us actually to be bold and courageous and say things and you know, and have confidence. So I spat that out, and that was the start of it. Later on, you know, I went on staff in '97 as a prison pastor. I said to Sandy, who in Sandy Miller, who was the vicar, who gave me the job, really, and Tricia Neal, I said, I know what one of those things is. You know, I know what prison is. I'm not sure about the pastor. And I went on staff to start up the Alpha course in the prisons and everything and all the other stuff. And it was then that Sandy said, I think we should get you some training. And I said arrogantly, I don't need any training. I came out of the army as a staff sergeant. I'm fine. I can do what. He said, no, maybe some biblical training. And that was the start that he put me forward to go for ordination training in the Church of England. And I said to him, Sandy, for goodness sake, please, I was expelled. You know, my parents were alcoholics. I was almost an alcoholic. I was in prison. I had 2 marriages, 2 divorces. I'm not the type of character to be a vicar. And he said, I think you're a brilliant candidate for the Church of England. And he set me off on ordination training. And eventually I did the first non-residential course then. I did Oak Hill, non-residential. And I developed the ministries that I've been doing. And I trained for 3 years, got a certificate in ordination, a degree. And Sandy welcomed me back. And I came back to the church that I walked in through the doors to do Alpha of as a curate. And so doing the stuff that I've been doing, they allowed me to do that stuff and be led by God.
I think I want to say one of the things that I've been in ministry now for over a couple of decades, and I'm a bit of an odd job man, you know, priest evangelist, that sort of thing. And one of the things that I've been is an area director of ordinance. So I would have been one of those people that would have journeyed with someone like you, helping them to discern their call to ordination. You're laughing. But here's the thing. I in my heart, I think I will always be a street kid from South London. I literally was, you know, grew up on the streets of South London. If it wasn't for my mum, because my old man left when I was really, really young, if it wasn't for my mum, who knows what would have happened, basically. So when I felt the calling to ordination, I too, like you, thought, nah, they're not going to want me. You know, I've got no qualifications. I've got a bit of a past. It's like, no, forget it. Now, on the other side of things, and also someone who's helped people to journey in the same way, I know that those are people who've got a journey, who've actually had that moment of like facing God's grace love and forgiveness and having their lives turned around, those are the ones who make the best ministers. They really, really do. So actually your journey, Paul, I would say qualifies you more than most to actually be a vicar. I really, really would.
Well, and the DDOs, what you're talking about, directors of ordinance, they were brilliant with me. Some of them were a bit confused when I started to unpack, because I was just totally honest. With me now, you see what you get. And I had to go for a few more interviews. I had to get the Archbishop of Canterbury's signature to go forward, a Canon C40, because of the divorces and my background. But they were amazing with me. And it was just, I remember Sandy saying to me, Paul, let's just keep going. If a door shuts, the door shuts. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And the doors just kept opening, even though, to be honest, I tried to shut them. Opened again, and I'd say things to shock people, and they go, that's fantastic. Well done.
Let me get my camera.
and I couldn't get out of it. So Sandy would say to me, just keep going, follow the breadcrumbs, and keep going through the doors. And there's a bit, and I think it's in Romans chapter 5, it's verses 3-5, where it says, through our sufferings, we develop perseverance. Through perseverance, we develop character. And through character, we develop a hope. And it's a hope that does not disappoint. And it's that sort of thing that's kept me going. And as you know, God can change, and he doesn't cause our sufferings or stuff like that, but he can use them to shape us and form us. That's what that passage is saying in Romans. Mm-hmm. And, and now, at Holy Trinity Brompton and St. Mellitus, the theological college, we now have a Peter stream, which is for characters like us, which the church, to be honest, didn't always want.
I'd love to be part of that.
but now they're realizing, it's all walks of life, but they're realizing that if you've had some, pretty dramatic life experiences and have come through them, they can be helpful to other people.
Mm-hmm. Second to last question, my friend. You've now got an MBE for the work you've done for the prisons, as it were, people in the prisons and what have you. And you've also got a charity for ex-servicemen and women and helping them set an equal and powerful calling, it would seem, God has given you to look after those who have left the forces. I'd love to hear in your book, for instance, you talk about this incredible trip you took to, I'm going to get the pronunciation wrong, so forgive me, I'm slightly dyslexic with a phonic thing, but it's something like Olmos prison in La Plata in Argentina. Your trip there was amazing. And I'd just like to say, what's the most incredible example you've witnessed of the gospel pouring out in your prison work and lives being changed?
Well, that prison, too many stories. That prison you're talking about, Olmos, in Argentina, was an extraordinary. I was a volunteer again before this stuff started. Emmy Wilson again got me into that one. Going to one of the most dangerous prisons in Latin America or in Argentina, and we went there. And what a brief story about that. I talk about it in the book, but that prison was so bad. There was demonic exercises going on there. It was 3 wings. It was enormous. And the 3rd wing was so violent. I'm talking, I don't even want to tell you what was going on there. The prison staff locked the wing up and would basically throw the food in to the men in there because it was so violent. There was decapitations going on there. There was sacrifices going on there. And it had this reputation. Anyway, long story short, a young pastor called Juan Zaccarelli was called by God to go there. And he tried to get in as a pastor. And they said, no, we don't do pastors here, not in this place. So what he did, he signed up as a prison officer in disguise, went through the training, became a prison officer, and witnessed in the prison, and went on to that wing, and then told everyone he was a pastor and Christ, and changed the whole wing.
Yeah.
Completely changed it. And I mentioned in the book that he changed the prison into a church where it had basic cell groups, and these horrendous men became Christians and then became pastors and ran cell groups, home groups in the prison. So we wanted to go and see it. Well, I didn't, Emmy did. And we went there, and I met this guy, Juan, who's still a friend, and saw what he did, and met these men who were doing demonic sacrifices, who are now reading the Bible and bringing people to Christ. And remember, I was very new at this. I'd just come off Alpha, really. And I could not understand. And one of the most amazing experiences, we were in this chapel with all these men around us, which they looked pretty scary, but they're Christian. And they said, we'd love to pray for you. Not us, we want to pray for you. And most of the team, there was about 10 of us, Emmy would tell it better, they all fell over in the power of the Spirit. And I was the only one standing. And the reason I was standing is I had my foot wedged because I thought, I am not falling over in this prison. And two of the men came over to me and laid hands on me. And it was such a powerful prayer that I completely blacked out. And I remember waking up, seeing all these men's faces, smiling, praying over me in this prison. Again, that was the start of God putting into my heart a passion for the lost, the broken, and the lonely, and the prisoner. But, apart from that, I mentioned people in the book, and Amanda mentions, there's Graham, there's Graham, there's Finney, there's Eddie, hundreds and hundreds of men who had no idea about God, no idea that they could change, and now members of churches, evangelists, married, got their kids back out of care, doing brilliant work, contributing to society, and are my best friends.
Amen.
Only the gospel can do that. And the most important thing is, and for 40 years, no one talked to me about the gospel. Unless we share our stories, that's why I wanted to do this with you. Unless we tell our stories, doesn't matter if you've been privately educated in Eton, if you've had brilliant parents, you've got a whole string of family, you've done nothing wrong in your life. It doesn't matter because you have a story. I could never believe that someone could be a Christian all their life. How do you do that? How do you stay married? How do you have uncles and aunties? You see, the simple things that we take for granted are extraordinary things to other people. And it's that brings people into the kingdom. It's about you, and it's about me, and it's about how God can change our lives. This narrative that he has for us. And I still can't not get excited that God changes people's lives. It's extraordinary what he does.
I was going to say to you, final question, but I think you've already just answered it. What's the thing you'd like to say to anyone sat in a prison right now? I don't even know if you can get internet access in prisons. I'd imagine in some parts you can't, and in some parts you might be able to if it's like a low security prison or something. But what's the one thing you'd like to say to anyone who is in prison right now with reference to the hope? Because you say, let me just say at the beginning, you say, no, actually, I've written it at the bottom here. The purpose of my story is to give hope to people. The purpose of my story is to give hope to people. And you also say, I want to encourage you, whatever your start in life or whatever troubles you are facing today, to remain attentive, to take a real hard look at yourself and ask the question, is my plan the only way, or could God be offering me something better? What would you say to anyone now who perhaps might be watching this in prison?
Well, there's a bit in Proverbs that says, hope deferred makes the heart sick. In other words, you haven't got hope, you haven't got a vision, so you're lost. So for 40 years of my life, I had no hope, I had no vision, I had no purpose. I was just, let's say, bumming along and doing all right certain times, nice girls, nice car, nice houses, nice money, all the stuff, but hopeless, not connected. And what I'd say to anyone, like I wrote those words, I always thought my plan was the best plan. And the reason I did that is not really my fault, is nobody told me there was another plan. Jeremiah 29, verse 11. And when someone told me, Eric Martin, that there was another plan, I started to think, maybe my plan is not the best plan, obviously. But I would say to anyone, give God a chance. We've just put 7,000 of these books through the generosity of a donor into the prison system. So every single book, every single prison in the United Kingdom has got 50 copies of that book. Very generous by a sponsor. And my prayer is that the men and women would read the book or see the Alpha online if they're doing it, 50 prisons are, and that they would give God a chance and just go, what have I got to lose? I'll just give God a chance. And if it's not for me, I'll bin it but you never know. It could just be the start of changing your complete life.
Yep.
That's what I'd say.
I think that's amazing. And as this channel grows and develops with the conference and other such things as well that, we got planned, my dearest hope is that this video, this interview will work and work and work. And it will touch the lives of countless people for months and years to come, and across the world, because, we really want this channel to grow. I think I'd also just on a personal level, just like to say, one of the things that and this again is like, just want to say generally, but also to maybe anyone who's going through the kind of season in life where prison might be on their radar or actually in their radar, is that when I was a street kid and I had a conversion experience later in life at the age of 21, the God that I met was not the God that I thought God was. I met a God who was much more generous, much more with it, if you like, much more fun, to use quite sort of like basic but real words, than I ever thought God was. I thought God was a bit austere, a policeman in the sky, someone who wanted to take the fun out of life, someone who would never know a young lad and want to be with a young lad. But actually, when you also look at the ministry of Jesus Christ here on earth, I was just the kind of person he wanted to know. And God was just so much, he wanted to put the fun back in my life, not take it out.
Amen.
Paul, you've been absolutely amazing. You really have. It feels a bit incongruous to finish now with my quick fire round of questions, but it is a light way to finish the interview. It only takes about 2 minutes. And then if you're able, it's the soldier in you, bring it on. and then if you can finish with a prayer, that'd be great. Okay, it's called Spotlight. A friend of mine called John Thurston named it as us. Here we go. What's the thing you can't live without?
My wife.
Film star crush.
Film star crush. Oh, goodness me. Film star crush. Can that be male or female?
She's only my friend.
Claudia Schiffer. I don't know. Lots of things. Lots of them. Action movies, Marvel comics, all of them.
Gotcha. Secret pleasure.
Secret pleasure. It's not a secret, really. It's running.
Okay, cool.
I love running.
If you could have a superpower, what would it be?
Flight.
Yeah, I'm the same actually. What's your favourite cereal?
Granola.
Dark chocolate or milk chocolate?
Oh, milk chocolate.
Can you reverse park?
Absolutely, perfect.
Of course you can.
I was a driving instructor in the army. Give me a break. Come on.
Have you still got that Porsche 911 somewhere?
No. I've now got a Jag. Still.
Of course.
Still buying cars I can't afford. Don't worry. But they are mine legally now, so that's good.
Okay, coming into land. You're in heaven for the first time, and you meet Jesus for the first time. What's the first thing that you'd like him to say to you?
Well, by the time I'm on my knees groveling on the floor because I can't quite believe I got there, what was the first thing I'd like to say to him? What I'd like him to say to me, is that what you said?
Yep.
What I'd like him to say to me. I've watched you over the years and I've loved you all the way through it.
Similar question. You're in heaven for the first time and you meet Jesus face to face for the first time. What's the first thing that you'd like to ask him?
Oh, the first thing that comes to mind is probably not a good thing. I'd like to say, in a nice way, where were you?
40 years!
Where were you for 40 years? And I know what he'd say.
I was knocking!
I know what he'd say back, Chris. He'd say, I was there all the time, you just weren't ready to listen.
Amen. Paul, bless you. This has been such a remarkable interview. As I said, I really, really hope it touches the lives of countless people, not just now, but in the future as the channel develops. And we want tons of your books at the conference. We really, really do. I want this to touch and change lives all throughout the world. So thank you. Would you pray us out?
I would. Thank you, Chris. Thank you for everyone that's listening. Father, thank you that you are an amazing God, that you have a good and perfect plan, and the suffering that we go through just develops us and shapes our character. You don't want us to go through any suffering, but we do. But you use it to your benefit and for others. And I pray, Lord, that anyone watching this channel that doesn't know you would start to investigate you. For those that know you watching the channel would get closer to you and deeper to you, and that we would be brave and courageous. And just remember that you say that our names are engraved on the palm of your hand, lest you don't forget us, even until the end of time. So thank you, Lord. Bless us, give us wisdom and discernment, and thank you that you died on the cross that we might have these lives. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.